I have entitled this series of studies, Simply Significant: How God Shapes Ordinary People for Extraordinary Purposes. As we began in our previous study talking about this topic, we noted that God shapes us with patience. We considered the fact that both in the case of Moses and of David, God was patient in how he worked in them and lifted them up, molded them as a potter does the clay into what he wanted them to be. So let me follow up with that. And notice that God makes us significant servants of his, not just with patience, but also, here it is, with preparation. Preparation. Think about how God prepared Moses and David, that indeed everything that Moses and David went through was getting them ready for their work, their significant ministry that God wanted them to do. What was their vocation? Well, both men were shepherds, out on the fields, leading sheep, feeding sheep, and protecting them. You know, sheep tend to stray. They don't know where to find pasture. They are some of the most defenseless creatures when a predator attacks them. They have no claws like a cat to scratch back or climb a tree. They have no fangs like a dog to bite their attacker. They have no wings to fly away or capacity to swim and dive underwater to avoid becoming a wolf's supper. They're not fast enough to escape. The only way they can be safe is because a shepherd guards them. The only way they are fed is because a shepherd guides them. Both Moses and David spent so many days with smelly sheep, walking under a scorching sun by day, sleeping under a blanket of dew and shivering at night, ready to jump up at the first howl or growl. How weary they must have become. Yet they were faithful, and so was God in his time and in his way to call them to shepherd the flock of God. Moses wandered around that same wilderness for some 40 years. 40 years that he'd already spent there with sheep, he would spend with God's people. Can you imagine? 40 years. He was 80. Maybe he thought his dreams were dashed. But no, God had been working, and the very thing that he did with sheep, Moses would do for God's flock, Israel. The place where he was trapped day by day would be the same area where he would lead them later. That's Moses. But then, as concerning David, David spent all that time with sheep. But in his isolation, he got to know the Lord, his shepherd. He cultivated a knowledge that would help him when he became the shepherd over Israel. Separated from men, he was shut up with God and experienced the Lord day by day, growing in grace and the knowledge of God. Listen to me. The work that you do may not seem to be getting you anywhere, but there are lessons you can learn that will make a difference later. When others seem to be set up in success while you're shut up in solitude, it can be tempting to get lazy and say, God's forgotten me. I'm stuck in this job when I want to do ministry. Listen, you live life forward, but you understand it backward. Think in terms of what a Bible teacher by the name of Henry Blackaby called spiritual markers. How each step along the way, God brings us to certain crisis moments. And as we do so, and as he works in us in a significant way, we put down what we might call a spiritual marker. And then, when we come to another important decision we have to make where God is guiding us, as we look back, we're going to see an alignment of those spiritual markers. And that's going to help us then to know what the next step needs to be. I think about how God has led me in my life, how he's molded me for my current productivity. The pressure of the potter's hands as the wheel turns is what shapes the clay. And that pressure on us as God molds us day by day is essential to become a vessel that God can use. Now, as you consider these thoughts, here's a question for further consideration. How can past experiences prepare us for future ministries? Have you seen that in your life? Think about it.